Michael Cohen reportedly has a story to tell. NBC News has confirmed Cohen is willing to inform Robert Mueller that Donald Trump, as a candidate, knew about that 2016 meeting between Russians and his top campaign aides at Trump Tower. A knowledgeable source says the president's former attorney is willing to tell the special counsel that Donald Trump Jr. told his father in advance of the meeting. Cohen's claims first were reported last night by CNN, whose sources say Cohen does not have evidence to back up his story. CNN also reporting a source familiar with Cohen's testimony to the House Intelligence Committee says Cohen did not testify that Trump had advance knowledge, nor does that claim appear in either of the committee's reports. Cohen's lawyer, Lanny Davis, declined comment, but reportedly told CNN, "I have to wonder why the Trump people put that story out. It was not from us." President Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, had this to say.
I expected something like this from Cohen. He's been lying all week. I mean, he's been lying for years. I don't see how he has any credibility. I mean, this is basically if you had a trial, and there won't be a trial here, but if you had a trial, you'd say, well, which lie do you want to pick? You want to pick the first lie, the second lie, or maybe some new lie? There's nobody that I know that knows him that hasn't warned me that if he's back us up against the wall, he'll lie like crazy, because he's lied all his life.
All right, so Emily Jane Fox, let's
sound like you're talking about Donald Trump.
I was thinking the same exact thing.
It sounded like if you took those words and applied them to the President of the United States, you'd be like, that sounds like a pretty
Let's talk about what Giuliani was talking about in that case, though. He's talking about Michael Cohen there. Emily, it is true, according to CNN, that Michael Cohen does not have evidence of his claim here. It is true that it does not appear in either of the reports that came out of the House Intel Committee. Cohen also testified last year before the Senate Intel Committee, so he didn't bring up this allegation there either. According to your reporting, is he willing to present some evidence that he knew that Donald Trump knew in advance about this meeting?
Yeah, I had reported on Monday that people in Cohen world had said that he had information that Robert Mueller and his investigation would be interested in, and 3 people at that time told me that some of that had to do with that Trump Tower meeting. So this has been something that has been in the air and in the orbit and talked about in Cohen world. It is my sense that there is not necessarily a smoking gun, a piece of evidence that the government had collected from his apartment, hotel room, and office, but that doesn't mean that he's not able to provide context. There were other people in the room. Rudy Giuliani denied last night on CNN that the other people in the room had said that. But the real issue here is that there are credibility issues on both sides. We know that Rudy Giuliani was untruthful on Friday when describing the audio recording that was released. He said it was completely exculpatory, that it was the president who brought up paying with a check. And I think it's pretty clear from the audio recording that we've heard now that that is not what Michael Cohen and the president had talked about in that conversation. And so it's hard to know who is telling the truth, but I think what is clear is that Michael Cohen believes he has a lot to offer prosecutors, but the fact that this came out limits his ability to do so. This is not a great day for Michael Cohen, and people in his orbit are frustrated and furious and feel like this is not what they wanted to have happen, and this is not how they wanted this to play out.
And it is true, Michael Schmidt, that this report comes out at a time when Cohen does feel like his back's up against the wall, when he has taken a more aggressive stand, hiring Lanny Davis, putting Lanny Davis out on TV, providing those tapes to CNN, of course, and that perhaps this piece of information that Cohen says he's willing to provide to Robert Mueller would get him out of trouble elsewhere.
Yeah, so he has 2 problems with the Justice Department. He has a New York problem and a Washington problem. And what he wants to do is he wants to use anything he has to offer to solve both of them. So could he make a global deal with the Justice Department? Could he sit down and say, look, I know Mueller's interested in this. I know the guys in New York want to know this. Here's my exposure. Can I do that? You need a very skilled lawyer to do that. And the Justice Department is going to frown, I think, upon this continued public discussion that has gone on with these lawyers, with Lanny out there discussing things the way that he has. I'm not sure how this has helped Michael Cohen. I'm just not sure.
What's clear, Donnie, is that we're a long way from, I would take a bullet for Donald Trump in terms of where Michael Cohen's head is right now.
Yeah.
And his stance toward the President of the United States.
We're about as far away from that as you can possibly get. And to jump off of Emily's point also, Michael, in my past conversation with Michael, what Michael has made very clear to me is, number one, and this is a man he worked for over a decade, nothing went on in this business without Donald knowing about it. And he had led me to believe that he could bring Trump back to Russia, that he What came out yesterday to me was not a surprise based on conversations Michael and I had that without a specific piece of paper, that I don't want to use his exact words, but that everything that was going on, Trump knew about.
Did he reference this meeting in particular when you talked to him?
Yes,
he did.
And this was several months ago, and maybe somebody else was even in the room when that happened, when that discussion happened. This is what it's going to come down to. And I think Michael, to Emily's point also, is frustrated because other than one or two of the statements he's made, he really, by his lawyer's advice and by his friend's advice, has understood it's time to be quiet. What's happening is he's kind of being pulled out, and he's very caught in between, I know I've got to lay low, I know I've got to wait for my day in court, literally and figuratively, but I got to punch back once in a while. And there's this constant battle, frankly, between Lonnie and his attorneys. How hard his attorneys obviously are clearly saying to him nothing.
Right. And
so there's that kind of emotional daily roller coaster of how he does it. I also think attached to this, we're going to get to this later in the show, the biggest story of yesterday, or probably last month, is Weiselberg, the CFO, that Emily also broke.
Trump Organization
of the CFO of the Trump. Yeah. That, and I've said this from the beginning, this is going to come back to 15 years or 20 years or 30 years of slimy, dishonest, underhanded business dealings. And you're going to connect that with Russia and everything else. And I think there are going to be things that come out we haven't even thought about.
Michael's got a piece on that we'll talk about in just a sec. John?
So this isn't the first time we've heard this assertion from someone who knows Donald Trump really well. Steve Bannon, in Michael Wolff's book, asserted this. Now, Steve Bannon was not actually in the Trump campaign in the relevant time frame. So his comments about this were seen as speculation, informed speculation, and retroactive informed speculation. But it's another person super close to Donald Trump who basically is either has direct knowledge or is claiming to have direct knowledge or believes what a lot of us believe, is that a meeting of this importance held by Don Jr. would not be something that would not have been reported to his father. I think that rings true to a lot of people. The question I have for you, Emily, is this. You were early, ahead of everybody, on the notion that when the information came out that there was a tape, that it was not Michael Cohen who would have put that out, that it was the Trump side. That was something you were way ahead on. The suggestion is, again, is that that's happening now again, that this isn't Michael Cohen who put this out, but somehow this is being put out by Donald Trump's side. I understood in the first instance why the Trump people would have wanted to get ahead of a tape and try to contextualize it, try to spin it, try to set it up if they knew it was going to come out anyway. What is, A, do you think this is the Trump people for sure who put this out, number one, and number two, this new information, and number two, this is different. There's not a tape to contextualize. What does the Trump side have to gain on this particular claim? If it's uncorroborated, there's no actual factual basis, there's no piece of evidence he has. Why would the Trump people do that if it is, in fact, the Trump people who've done it?
I'll tell you what the Cohen orbit believes about this, because I think that the waters here are so muddy and it's so hard to understand anyone's motivation in any of this, and I think you could probably argue both sides. But in Cohen world, the discussion is, how does this serve us? For this to be out here, there is absolutely no benefit for Michael Cohen. He is not seeking a pardon from everything I know in my reporting. That is not something he's interested in, not something he's looking for. So he's not sending a smoke signal there. This could potentially hinder his ability to cooperate with prosecutors if they feel like a card has been taken from his deck and he doesn't have as much to offer him now. The Trump motivation, look, Michael Cohen was very vocal in his Stephanopoulos interview on ABC a few weeks ago. There were two things that stuck out to me from that interview. There was one, the fact that Stephanopoulos knew to ask about payments to women, which now came out in the recording, and Stephanopoulos knew to ask about the Trump Tower meeting. And at the time, I had said, it's interesting that those two things were asked about. I don't think that was an accident. So Rudy Giuliani and the legal team had sort of a preview of two cards in Michael Cohen's deck. And so it's possible that because they knew that those were two things that were on Michael Cohen's mind, because there was maybe this meeting that happened and people in Trump's orbit maybe were in that meeting in Trump Tower, that they're trying to get ahead of two things that Michael Cohen had signaled he was willing to talk to investigators about.
If Michael Cohen's reported claims are true, and again, there's no evidence yet presented to that effect, that Donald Trump Jr. told his father in advance of the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting with Russians, it would contradict claims from Trump and his son after the New York Times broke this story 1 year ago.
A lot of people are going to want to know this about your father. Mm-hmm. Did you tell your father anything about this?
No. It was such a nothing. There was nothing to tell. I mean, I wouldn't have even remembered it until you start scouring through the stuff.
Did you know at the time that they had the meeting?
No, I didn't know anything about the meeting.
But you know, you gave us.
It must have been a very important, must have been a very unimportant meeting because I never even heard about it.
No one told you a word, nothing. I know we
Nobody
talked about
told
this in the plane a little bit, but nobody.
No, nobody told me. I didn't know that. It was a very unimportant, sounded like a very unimportant meeting.
So there we have a piece of Michael Schmidt's conversation with the president and Maggie Haberman, his colleague. But Heidi Przybyl, I want to go to you first on the congressional side of this, because they're saying that, you know, this never came up in the House Intelligence meeting. Is it possible that Donald Trump Jr. lied to Congress?
It's possible. We don't know exactly because we don't have those transcripts. But I will note a very important timeline in this in terms of who's going to be questioned additionally about this, in terms of Don Jr., what he knew, and also Paul Manafort and what he knew. What we know is that Don Jr. made 2 calls around this meeting to a blocked number, which was the modem operandi for him calling his father to a blocked number. One was before, one was after. We also know from movements outside and inside Trump Tower that Trump was physically present during that meeting, and we know that within hours afterwards, he was meeting up with Paul Manafort at a luncheon just down the street. So there would have been every opportunity for the president to have been briefed. And again, to take you back to Steve Bannon's remarks in the book, it is incredulous to believe that the president hadn't been debriefed. So I think where this becomes important, if they're going to try and discredit Michael Cohen, is to look for corroboration from others who would have known. And of course, if Don Jr. told Fox News, you know, that may be, you know, come out as a lie.
I just want to go back to the line that John Heilemann quoted from Steve Bannon in the Michael Wolff book, Fire and Fury. He called that Trump Tower meeting treasonous, did Bannon. He went on to say the chance that Don Jr. did not walk the Russians up to his father's office on the 26th floor is 0. Now, that doesn't suggest that he knew about it beforehand, but it does suggest that he may have known about it.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.